Hi, I'm Brittany Ashley, your host of Breaking Norms, Building Dreams, your guide through this transformative journey in both business and life. This is your place crafted for dreamers, doers, or anyone who has been told they can't. Get ready as we challenge those narratives together. You're tuning in live to the United Public Radio Network, airing on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. We are streaming on all the popular platforms every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join me for a candid and thought-provoking conversation celebrating your unique journey because you are worth it. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. I am so excited to be here today. Last week didn't work out with Annabelle, unfortunately. We had severe windstorms here in Victoria. So unfortunately, the show didn't go on, but she will be back. So no stress there, because I know I had to promote it and we had to take last minute break and reshift everything. But that's what happens with technology if it doesn't work. Everyone, happy Monday. Welcome to Breaking Norms, Building Dreams. I'm your host, Brittany Ashley, and we are broadcasting live today on the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. So get ready to escape the next hour as we break norms and build dreams with my special guest, Chavisa. I'm so excited to have you here today because this is the perfect day to talk about trauma, all the things. It's I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so pleased to be joining you. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, even the birds are excited to be here. They chimed in perfectly. I'll just do a little short bio here. Am I saying your name right? Chavisa. I want to say
Chavisa.
Is the owner of the Mother Corp. She is the subject matter expert in trauma-informed services, drawing from personal experience, education, and professional training. Her trauma-informed practice is evidence-based and holistic. She holds a master's degree in social science and a graduate diploma in adult education, is an expert in addressing gender-based violence, hidden abuse, financial abuse, and post-separation abuse. Chavisa is a certified divorce coach, International Coach Federation. Oh, I didn't realize with the International Coach. Perfect. Specializing in parents in high conflict disputes and hidden abuse. She is certified as a trauma recovery practitioner with ongoing training in trauma-informed interventions, as well as, how do you say this? As well as Reiki?
Is it Jakey Den Reiki? Yeah. It's an energy practitioner.
Oh, I didn't know that. We're going to have to dig more into that. She provides effective emotional, logical, can't even talk today, and practical supports. I'm so excited to have you today because I think you and I were just discussing before we went live that it is Remembrance Day, which is very important that we take today to remember those and honor those who served in sacrificing for our freedom. So today I just thought to honor those, I would like to still take a minute. I know we are on air, so everybody listening, if we can just take 1 minute to remember those on our special Remembrance Day. Thank you, everyone. I had a stopwatch to make sure that we did the 1 minute. Well, I'm so excited. Let's maybe dig in on Remembrance Day and the trauma there. Let's just go right into it.
So, well, it's such a beautiful experience to talk to you today of all days, because Remembrance Day is the marker for the end of World War II. And so that means that so many of us have had grandparents particularly males, but the women who accompanied them and supported them and built families with them, impacted by war. And so World War II is a good representative of how intergenerational trauma works, right? Because the dynamics of these men coming back from atrocities and then trying to rebuild normal lives and recommence relationships and have families with that sort of often frequently unprocessed trauma. What that meant is that went into family systems, and that created and commenced in those circumstances the beginning of maybe some unusual relationship. So I can give an example from my family, like someone who goes into rage, or someone who goes into black rage, where it's like the family goes off to give this person a lot of space. And that's actually, like, I always thought about it in my family as that was a behavior, but actually what that was is trauma showing up, unaddressed trauma showing up. And so families learn to mitigate and navigate as people start to try and manage these unaddressed traumas. And so they come down through family lines. And so when we think of them, we think, oh, my grandparents had tics and quirks, and they had strange behaviors, and there were some strange family relationships. We don't really get our finger on the pulse. But actually, if we look carefully and we think, this is a generation of men who came home from atrocities, there's very likely intergenerational trauma that's impacted probably the majority of families. And this is just part of what we deem normal, or just how our families are. But so this is a beautiful opportunity to have this discussion today.
I'm actually doing a course. I didn't even have a chance to tell you this, but I'm actually doing a course, Trauma with Money. And right now we're kind of digging into the root of at like child trauma to the gene trauma. What does that mean? So I just love to hear more from you. Like, maybe we can just start from what is trauma? Like we don't have to give like the dictionary term, but just for anybody listening, maybe we can kind of break that down, because there's so many different ways that it can go.
So trauma is, what's interesting about trauma is it can be a single occurrence or multiple occurrences. And so it's something that overwhelms the system, that overwhelms the normal adaptation to be able to cope. So I'll give you an example of a single event, like a car accident, or a violence on the street, or an extended experience, something like violence in the home, or gender-based violence that's ongoing, or even going through extensive litigation towards getting separated. Those are different kinds of traumas, but basically they overwhelm the human adaptation to be able to incorporate into day-to-day life. And trauma often evokes feelings of helplessness and terror that overwhelms the system. And so what's interesting about trauma is, let's say you and I have the same traumatic experience, Brittany. You might bounce back perfectly fine and just keep going with your life. And I might feel a significant impact from that trauma for days and weeks and months and years. So how people respond to trauma is very individuated. And so basically it has to be understood in context.
Yeah. And you're not just specialized in one area of trauma, which I just find amazing, because post-separation trauma or post-separation abuse, I never even heard of before. Or like, I've heard of financial abuse, because that's kind of part of the money and trauma that we're talking a little bit more about. But do you find like one shows up more than the other? Or how does trauma show up? I know you said individually and it's such a range, but I want to maybe go back to the questions. How common is it?
Well, this is a great question. And this is where I do a lot of my work, is around de-stigmatizing trauma. So my background, I have a master's degree and a graduate diploma. And then I'm also, as you said, a certified divorce coach, and I'm certified in trauma recovery. But I always like to do my practice evidence-based. So I love reading theory. And so trauma is pretty prevalent. So the ACE studies, the early childhood experiences study, say that under 18 years of age, the first number I found was 50% of children experience a traumatic experience, 1 to 2, and then up to 64%. So that means over half our population is experiencing trauma, maybe from their very early years or their commencing of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at the adult population in terms of prevalence, the numbers are 70% up to 90%, and that the average adult will experience 1 to 5 traumas in their lifetimes. So this is and this is part of why I'm so passionate about this project, this topic, because I would say this is my life project. I'm so passionate about trauma-informed practices and trauma-informed care, because it's not a us and them over there situation. It's not a, oh, there's trauma over there. Trauma happens to us. It's part of what is part of the human experience. And so if you're alive on earth for enough period of a time, you are more than likely to experience a trauma. And so it's a me, we, and us experience. It's not over there. And so I try and really situate humanity and compassion based on the numbers. We're living with this. So can we be kind and gentle and compassionate to ourselves? Because if I'm experiencing, then likely many others are too, right?
Yeah, it's kind of, it doesn't fit in one box, I want to say.
Not at all.
And like the one thing that I've been just saying, like I did like a presentation not too long ago of how can we give each other more grace? How can we give each other more? I actually just saw a TikTok was like, I watch so much TikTok, but that was kind of, there was a state of the situation of a person, and it was just instant judgment of, oh, that person shouldn't be a mother because of X, Y, and Z. And then 20 minutes earlier, it kind of rewinds back. And it was actually a kid being put into a foster home for the first time or the 6th time. And they went out for lunch just to see it because he asked to go for lunch. And that person who placed that judgment right away didn't understand what maybe happened 20 minutes ago or 30 days ago. Just it's like that instant judgment state. And so how do we as humans stop judging right away and ask more curious questions or be more kinder?
Well, this is it. Instead of coming at it with a judgment lens, like curiosity and trying to understand context, because it takes thoughtfulness to plug in, to be willing to understand the context that someone finds themselves in, and also the context that facilitate the adaptive behavior, right? But, I just want to return to the, I heard great things about the trauma of money as a program. So well done on taking that. But it's true, like if we go back to thinking about Remembrance Day and the men who returned from war, like, you know, many people were recommencing their lives, right? And arguably with nothing. And so, you know, you're starting to see the early seeds of some of this intergenerational trauma of money, right? Where it's like people are scraping together a few things and then starting to have families, you know, and starting to have kids, and then not necessarily having enough resources. So then there's scarcity, and there's, you know, food issue, you know, food scarcity and monetary scarcity. And so these kind of behaviors to adapt to scarcity, they start to turn into behaviors that trickle down family lines. And this is where you start to see like generations like ours, where there is trauma around money and you can't necessarily put your finger on it, but it's like learned behaviors over generations.
Yes. I've been doing so many different quizzes and all the things for the class. And even just like, I kid you not, like I probably cry almost every single time we're in that course, because they want you to go through your own inner trauma before you go and work with anybody else. And so you kind of learn like your patterns and where those things come up as well. And I love that they have little segment groups as well for, my background is Métis. And so it's, we meet as a group as Indigenous Métis, those of Black, all in one area, and we kind of go and break down the onion a little bit more and ask, and it's a safe place. And I love it. And having that safe place to kind of talk through and understand the trauma and that where it's coming from too.
And that's one of the foundational principles around where you start to address trauma is you produce the safe container, the safe relationship from which you can start to catch your breath and also then start to be reflexive. And so a big part of what I do is I bring my professional background with my lived expertise. So I've had my own experience of extended gender-based violence and post-traumatic or post-separation abuse. And so I bring that lived expertise to be able to support the people that I work with. And so it's in part, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the starting to process and break down and do that personal work where you're reflexive and you understand the impact and you have the feeling state and allow the feeling state to emerge. It's part, you're starting to learn, to my mind, the terrain of navigation here, where you're starting to develop an internal map around how to navigate this. So the next chapter you do in your program, when it evokes the reflection and the tears and the amplifies some healing properties, where you're starting to develop a roadmap for how to navigate and digest and metabolize trauma. And so that's a really powerful place to work with other people from, because you've already done that terrain. And it's not a conceptual, heady, I read it in a textbook and now we're going to do it together. It's a embodied, oh, I remember that feeling. Like, here we go. Let's talk about those challenging feelings as well, and hold space for them in a really generous way.
And it's hard to talk about trauma, but heal and go through those pieces is really important. It's funny because I did like a tarot card reading not too long ago. The lady looked at me and she's like, you're going to recover from 3 major traumas in your life, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And now I'm doing this course. I'm like, oh, did she look into my future? It's so funny. But the one thing that we did in the program is like writing a letter to money. And that was just kind of like so many aha moments, for sure, for myself. I wanted to ask you, is there maybe some common misunderstandings that people have about trauma and who it affects?
Absolutely. So as a society, I would say we're pretty avoidant, and especially around trauma. We want it to be over there. If we look at our languaging, even around PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's over, like I work with populations who are experiencing trauma, who have experienced trauma, and who are living with trauma. It's not post for the people that I serve. They are going through trauma. And so as a society, I think there's almost like an insistence. I am uncomfortable with, or like, I think as a societal voice, it's like, we're uncomfortable with trauma and we want it over there in the past. And so that's part of why I do the service I do, because it's so hard for family and friends to accompany people through trauma, especially extended trauma, because it's so ongoing and laborious, but it takes so much emotional capacity that we're not necessarily as within our society comfortable with, especially like the big feelings, and then especially if institutions are involved and it's so bureaucratic and complicated and so hard to navigate, and people are overwhelmed with navigating big systems. So the feelings plus the navigation can be so intense for people. And so if we're uncomfortable with these feeling states, then we're not meaningfully accompanied. And so I think often for the people that I serve, their family and friends fall away because they can't stay connected. And so part of why I developed the Mother Corp and the intention is to take weight out of the network. It's like from like lawyers who have a client who's crying in their office I can help that client get grounded so that they can interact with their lawyer efficiently. But I can also do that for friends and family where they're worried about a friend and they're in an arduous situation, but the friend's already got their plate overloaded. And so they can't meaningfully accompany and support. And so when they tee me in, then the friend feels relieved. Okay, we've got this beloved friend who we want to help into good hands. Yeah. So it relieves, I guess I'll use in this term, the word burden, or relieves weight. Yeah. And so people can rest. And then we know the person who needs the support is getting some meaningful, loving support of someone who understands the terrain and is not overwhelmed by it.
Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that friend or a family member doesn't want to help that person. It's just they might not have the right tools in their toolbox to help them navigate certain things that they've never maybe even went through themselves or whichever. So that's where you step in.
Absolutely. It's like when I remember when I was talking about the extended gender-based violence that I experienced, and people would say to me, you just need a lawyer. You just need a good lawyer. Mm-hmm. And it's like being offered like a lollipop in front of a fire. It's like the lollipop doesn't put out the fire, it's like, it was such a disconnect. And so sometimes like I found that kind of feedback where someone says, you just need a so-and-so. What they're articulating to the person who's in need is, I don't understand your terrain. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand what you're going through. So they're making these kind of like very surface level gestures without understanding the complexity. Like, you do need a good lawyer, but a good lawyer is a long, arduous process. And you also need phenomenal support going through that interaction, right? Mm-hmm. Experience.
Yeah. And just kind of going back to that too, like I find we've had very close friends go through a lot of kind of trauma-based things. And I'm the kind of person that always wants to help. As much as I can. I'll go 100 miles a minute to help. But the thing is that I know, like doing like my own kind of education and understanding on coaching and therapy and all that I can't always necessarily be that helper. So my way of my toolbox is, I know you. I'm like, let me bring in so-and-so, or I know a great person over here for this. Like, to know these kind of people within your network is also a way of helping, instead of just not like, you don't need to like sometimes dig root into a conversation if someone doesn't feel comfortable in doing it, but knowing that they have those resources too, to kind of reach out.
Absolutely. I mean, to be resourced means to have, a doctor and a lawyer and a, resource all over, as many resources as you can, I guess, gather so that you can have the correct resource for the right thing. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, in our society, people get divorced. Mm-hmm. Divorce is frequent. One time, people get married maybe up to 2 or 3 times in their lifetimes, right? Yeah. And so divorce, even if you got divorced 2 or 3 times in your lifetime, it's still a rare experience and a rare occasion. But I'm trained in the terrain of divorce. I understand the nuances, and I'm very familiar with this space. So for me, I understand how to navigate this space. And then the other thing is, because the divorces that I specialize in are high conflict, they're often traumatic. And that's why I got certified in trauma recovery, because in part, when people are interacting with institutions, and we know institutions don't work for everyone, and we know some people have better experiences with institutions than others, so that's really well documented. But because now somebody's interacting with an institution, then it can amplify the kind of trauma that people are experiencing. And so that's where it's really useful to be able to combine the knowledge of the terrain of divorce, and then my expertise around gender-based violence and hidden abuse and post-separation abuse and financial abuse, as well as being able to do trauma recovery. Because when the people that I work with, I really support them to look after themselves and do self-care.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if I'm working with a person who's a parent, the more I can help that person get into the strongest, most grounded space they can be in, then I know they can be the best parent that they can be. And so it has a ripple out effect. As we support the individual, then it impacts their children and their families and their work environment and their friends and their communities.
Mm-hmm. I was actually have it on my sheet here to talk a little bit more about bad divorce, because maybe you actually even know the stats on this. If you don't know pressure, but I know divorce rates are quite high. I would say definitely after like COVID, so many separations, it seemed to have like just gone off the radar. Or it end up keeping more people closer together. But I definitely saw like such a range in a lot of more broken families and a lot more divorce during and after COVID.
Yeah. So I always try and ensure taking, for me, where I sit, I take the stigma out of the languaging. Like for some people to end a relationship is the healthiest, most life affirming decision they could do. So I usually commend people on the decisions they come to. In my work as a divorce coach, I don't work with people necessarily making a decision about their marriages. I usually work with people in where I work, in the space I work in. I usually, once people have made a firm decision for themselves, because there's so many layers to it, then I can help them navigate and process. That's just a general rule how I work. But that's a bit different if there's abuse involved. So then I can help people navigate earlier. Now I've lost my train of thought.
There's somebody that just left a comment. Unfortunately, I can't see your name because it's not rendering Facebook for me, but it says that I've seen so many friends and long-term partnerships in the last year.
So thanks. Okay. So thanks for bringing me back on topic. So the numbers, I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's like half of marriages end in divorce. Second marriages higher, 60% in Canada, 67% in the US for second marriages, and third marriages, 73%, I want to say. And the reason why those second and third marriages have more pressures is that often there's other relationship configurations. There's kids, there's co-parenting, there's blending families, there's what happens if the two kids are fighting incessantly. So there's a lot more tensions onto the relationship structure. And also people who are onto their next marriage often have more, there's some more pressures in terms of compatibility. Again, like I can say as a co-parent, I have a very particular schedule. So it makes different challenges for dating. So I do think there's relationships, the numbers, those are the stats for relationships breaking down. And then the population that I'm specialized in is high conflict divorces. And so the data on our side, I don't have the exact numbers with me, but the numbers are that a subset of divorces, okay, so I think it was 23% end because there's abuse in the marriage or abuse in the relationship. And then of those, it's like somewhere between, I think, 8 and 12% go to, or 10 and 15% go to extended litigation. And that litigation is usually around children and access and custody. So to me, that says these are parents who are going through these long extended court situations. And then of those, 8 to 12% are high conflict repeat litigation for years and years and years. So that's the subset that I specialize in.
As my parents are divorced, and for somebody who has, I think they were going to court until I was like 22. Like I can't even remember, which looking back on it now, like in my late 30s, but I'm like, that's just bananas to me. And I was the only child. But like, that's part of the trauma too that a lot of children experience too. Adriana, thank you for putting your name. She wrote, dating is challenging in general these days, especially online and especially with kids. I totally believe that. Yeah.
I mean, the dating piece is really interesting because, well, you're wondering if the person has resolved and worked through emotionally the end of their relationship. But then there's the scheduling stuff, right? It's like, my kid is always home on Wednesday and Thursday. So does the other person, like, what days are their kids home? Do you ever want to try and curate? I'm just talking to the tensions about dating for co-parenting, because I help people rebuild their lives and help them think through all the components to how to navigate this space. So I've done a lot of thinking around it, but it's like, how do their parenting schedules line up? Will they ever get alone time, or do they get your kids are home these days, his kids are home these days? Do you ever get alone time? How do you navigate holidays and pro D days and these kind of things? So there's like a very strange scheduling, and often this is like these kind of schedules are set in court documents, so they're not fluid, and they're intended for, court documents are in this region are intended for the best interest of the child. But the best interest of the parent, I mean, it becomes quite challenging when you're on a very set, strict timeline, because that definitely impacts the kind of social relationships you can navigate afterwards.
Yeah. Like, looking back, like, we did, I think it was mostly like every other weekend would be like at my dad's, for example. I don't even remember, to be honest. It's like childhood memory gone. But I do remember, like, holidays was always like a question, and then like that's why it had to be like within like the court documents of like who gets what. Which, oh, sorry, what were you?
Sorry, I'll let you finish your idea.
Oh, I completely lost track.
Well, I mean, this is a big space that I work with people on trauma, because I help people with navigation, strategy, problem solving, and making informed decisions. And so if you've gone from a house of 2 adults with children, and now you're going into separate houses and looking at a potential, often a co-parenting arrangement, and it's like, okay, we want to, ideally people come to me earlier than later, because then I can help them think through all the parenting pieces so that they can think through, okay, how does the hockey equipment get from house to house to house? How does camps sign up? Who signs up for camp? Who pays the deposit? Like, if you don't pre-think out all those nuances, and let's say you forget a few details on a parenting arrangement, then it can produce a lot of space where it can become sites of contention and long and extended disputes and a lot of stress. So it's, to my mind, it's really useful to talk to someone who's skilled in this area early, so that you can try and like dot all the I's and cross all the T's, so that later you haven't, inadvertently, because people are under so much stress and trauma during these processes, that it's really easy to not understand the nuances of what that's going to produce. And often that paperwork will produce a decade or a decade and a half of what your reality is going to be like.
Yeah. Now that you're saying all this, I'm like, yeah, I remember all this being like an issue, and I would just have spare clothes. So then when I was jumping between houses, it wouldn't be like an ordeal of me bringing back and forth clothing or whatever. It was just easy because I just knew that certain things were there. Less stress.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes back to this idea around whether or not financial abuse has occurred, and if there's enough resources in both homes to make sure that there's adequate extra stuff. Like, in my heart, I'm an environmentalist. So the idea that one child now needs 2 of everything is, it's environmentally degrading. It's kind of like, obviously, like, the best case scenario is that there's free flow of whatever materials and items the child needs between homes. but often that's not the way it goes. And so people really have to sort of work to do the best they can.
Yeah. I like just to see like co-parenting now and how I feel like it's evolved so much more. I think we're talking a lot more about co-parenting a lot more and how it can look really good, which is, I think, amazing for the kiddos. We're already halfway past. So for anyone just listening, I told you it was going to go fast.
Yeah.
We are midway into the show. So those just tuning in, please welcome Chavisa, and we're going through the trauma with we're breaking it down greatly. Our next topic, please stay tuned, because this is going to be a next topic that we're going to be jumping in a little bit about the election. But thank you for those listening to United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. Before we talk about the election and all of that, because I know we can end with that, because I think that would be a very powerful topic to go into, I thought we should also talk about hidden abuse, because after kind of reading a bit more on what you do, I'm like, interesting. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about hidden abuse and what can come up for there.
Sure. So I think that the dominant ideas around what abuse is physical and sexual. And those are definitely the most dominant kinds of violence that people experience. But then there's another layer of abuse that's more invisibilized. So you started speaking to this financial abuse, where finances become used as a control and coercion tactic. Other examples, control and coercion. And in the Canadian context, the federal government is now looking at a bill to address control and coercion. So it's a pretty substantive area. So other areas are for hidden abuse, like we've been alluding to, where things become long drawn out litigation. So the example that you gave of your parents going to court until you were in your early 20s, like this kind of extended litigation definitely has a traumatic impact on people. And so often, it's one thing to have a legal issue and go to court and get it resolved, and then it's resolved. But it's another where these litigations go on and on and on and on. I can say in my own experience, like my divorce took 4 years to be approved. And I got my divorce paperwork got rejected by the Supreme Court on 3 occasions. So again, it's like, because there wasn't all the proper safety mechanisms in the document, and because both parties have to sign, right? So if it's not agreed on and signed off on, then it stays in the court system for an arduous period of time. And it can become very power imbalanced, because especially with litigation, because litigation is very much about who has resources. Lawyers are expensive. To go to court is expensive. To go to trial is very expensive. And so if there's a power imbalance, which is part of hidden abuse, but if there's a power imbalance, then certain institutions can become leveraged and used harmfully or abusively. So that's another space that I work in. And also, parenting relationships can definitely be part where parents experience sabotage of their parenting and undermining of relationships. So these are very sore and tender spaces. And I also, another example of hidden abuse is where bureaucratic processes or institutions get misused or for false allegations. And luckily, what I'm seeing in this region is that some institutions are very mindful. Like I'm seeing here large institutions who no longer allow anonymous reporting, because they know that so frequently the reports are not accurate safety concerns. They are a space to make things more challenging for the targeted person. And so they're trying to, now that they've taken out the anonymous reporting, then they can see, oh, so-and-so has reported the same thing 6 times. None of them are verified or reasonable allegations.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot to take in, but it's so good. I'm like, keep telling me more.
Well, I'll just say it's not these. I mean, the tension is. So I'll give you an example. If you got physically assaulted and you called the police, they'd probably be able to see, and you'd go to the doctor or go to the hospital, and it would be like pretty quick verification process. But if you're dealing with spaces around a course of control, it's much then you need to be able to demonstrate a pattern. A pattern of behavior. And so that's what I work with people on. And this is really important. I work with people to let's move away from labels. Labels like narcissist and gaslighting and are not useful. Let's demonstrate with facts and behaviors and actions. And then we can say, hey, look, this behavior happened on 26 occasions. And then you can demonstrate a pattern.
I like that.
Well, I think it's really important. I mean, for people who are traveling through legal spheres, they need to work in a way that's functional for the legal sphere. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not a financial planner, but I can help people navigate and get really clear and gather their documentation and help them document what's going on so that they can demonstrate facts so that they can articulate their position.
Yeah. And it's very true to have the facts. I came from, before my husband, a physically abusive relationship. And I remember being in the courtroom and they're like arguing with me all these things. And I don't know what happened, but I blacked out. And I remember being like, I just listed all the facts and the dates. Like, I don't even remember where I remembered it from. And then I looked at the judge and it was like, kind of like at that point was like, case closed. Like, we're done. She was in the right, standing up for herself and so I was just like, I don't know what happened, but I remember stating all the facts very specifically and not trying to pinpoint being like, oh, he's narcissistic. And so we need to just, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, well, it sounds like you had a trauma. And so just to acknowledge that, like, it sounds like your body was responding to trauma. And also to commend you on it. It is super important to be able to demonstrate facts and use facts to articulate your position, because facts and labels are worlds apart, and labels don't help people advance their cases and get to safety. But facts do. And facts are what's needed to move effectively through institutions. And that's a lot of what I help people with, is to be efficient and effective. So they can bring their messiness to me, and I'm happy to have people cry and grieve and rage, whatever the big feelings are. I'm a safe place where you can have those feelings. But at the end of the day, you don't want to be having crying in your lawyer's office, because that's a very expensive place to cry. There, in those spaces, you want to just be very grounded, efficient, organized, and capable. And so that's what I really try and give people support. So I offer people emotional, logistical, and practical support so that they're empowered when they interact with their professional team to be in the best space they can be.
I love that, because thinking back and the different kind of traumas, you're not really sometimes in the right state. You're just kind of sometimes in the fight mode. And so you just don't know what else to kind of do other than show up and fight. So when I was going through all that stuff, I blacked out, and I don't even know how I remembered certain things, but I just did. And that helped with the case. I'm looking at the time, and I want to be mindful of this, but I think really we should talk a little bit about the election trauma and all the stress and all the things that we're seeing there. I know this could be a hot topic for anybody that might be listening, so be mindful of your comments, please.
Well, I first start by saying I'm on the unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. So I live in Vancouver, Canada. So I'm distinctly a neighbor of Americans south of me. So just to put that in context, but as a neighbor, it's been very challenging to see the election results, and mindful that for many, this is the results of the election has commenced and is a reiteration of a collective trauma. And so my intuitive guess is that a third to half the population is currently experiencing a collective trauma. So as said at the beginning, when we looked at discussed the commensurate definition of trauma, if two people have a trauma, one might bounce back and have no issue. And for another, it might be a very, very long process and very challenging. So, some people will bounce back, and some people will sit with a lot of big, complex feelings and a lot of complex thinking and grieving as a result of this. But we know disproportionately some populations are impacted more substantively than others. And so this election result is going to have more challenges for some people than others, in which case the trauma in those populations would be more pronounced.
Do you have, if anyone's maybe dealing with a lot of stress right now, a lot of trauma, do you have any advice for them if they're listening to us today?
So I always start with myself. This is the sphere that I can manage. And so I encourage people who are going through trauma to really ramp up the self-care and really try and start to take beautiful, beautiful, exquisite care of yourself. So that means, sitting and having your water with regularity. And I'm not trying to simplify what it is, but I do think as humans who have to eat a number of times a day and have to go to the washroom a number of times a day and have to drink a number of times a day, how can we take these basic things that help us sustain ourselves? How can we turn them and make them from an average behavior to a next level self-care behavior? So I'll give you an example. I have to eat. I can eat over the sink, standing up, just take the food out of the fridge and eat over the sink. It's very functional, right? Like a horse would eat hay.
Yeah.
Or no, but this is an act of self-care, is when I realized, okay, this is a space that I can do an intervention. I can do an intervention by setting the table for myself. I can set the table and I can fold a napkin, even if it's a paper towel. If I fold it, it looks more pleasing. And so I set the space for this. Create an environment for where I'm going to consume and nourish myself, right? This is very different than eating like a horse over the sink. You're doing the exact same function, right? You're getting food into your body, but the act of creation and being attentive to the environment, and again, taking the invitation to rethink the context, is a very powerful space around self-care, right? Taking yourself for a walk the beautiful way as opposed to the most straightforward way. Making sure that you go and spend time with nature, because nature is very healing and nature has been here a lot longer than us. So, it's like find spaces to restore yourself. And I also think during collective trauma, spaces we can look after ourselves is connect with community, build community, affirm community, reach out to community, and just try and amplify those relationships. Because in my mind, what I've seen thus far in the last few days is that there's an awful lot of love traveling through these networks. And it wasn't there before. So actually, this is an amplified space for loving other people and receiving love in return.
While you're speaking there, I was just thinking in my brain, what about community? And I love that you touched on that, because I think during these times right now, you might be feeling alone, that different things might be coming up for you emotionally about the current election, and to know that you're not alone. I'm based also in Canada. I'm up here on the Songhees land, Victoria, BC. but we're very close. We're very close. We're not too far off the beaten track, very close to Seattle. So I interact a lot with a lot of Americans through my networking and all of that. And there's so many that have told me that they want to come move to Canada, that they're completely shut down. They're very emotional about everything that has happened, and they just don't know what else to do but other than leave America.
Well, I mean, like in the work I do, it's like watching a neighbor who's dating someone who's got a known history of sexual assault, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, that person is not going to be safe. They are dating someone who's dangerous. And the thing is, it's very painful to watch someone and think, oh, well, I'm dating someone who's got a background of sexual assault, but they won't hurt me. They won't hurt here. Like there's a cognitive dissonance that's required. And so it's a lot for neighbors to observe and grapple with. It's a lot for Americans to experience and grapple with. But I guess the space that I would say is try and really bolster your self-love as an act of affirmation and as an act of self-care and restoration. And so, it's like, be gentle with yourself, allow the feelings to come. Crying is normal. Anger is normal. Do it safely, figure out safe ways to be angry, figure out safe ways to express your sadness, find safe ways to be able to grieve. And so that's really important, is to produce safe containers for big feelings.
Yes.
And then the other piece is, like if you're suffering, then maybe now's a good time to have shared potluck dinners and just start community building and relationship building and solidarity building. Yeah.
Community can do great things when they come together. I know, like lately, for whatever reason, I'm like, I just feel like we need to start doing a monthly get together with all our friends and family, whoever I tend to adopt people as family. And so my thing now is, let's show up every month, like a potluck kind of style dinner. So we can life is so busy, but it's a safe place. Everyone comes here and we do dinner and games. If you can make it, you can make it. If you can't make it, you can't make it. It's just an open door.
Yeah, beautiful. And what happens if we replace the games with reading a book together, or reading a chapter together, or reading 2 pages from a book together, and then having a discussion? Because like from what I've seen is that there's a lot of beautiful minds. There's a lot of brilliant scholars, and like bell hooks, there's a lot of beautiful minds talking about how to withstand collective trauma and how to navigate oppression. And so sometimes even taking a short verse of reading material and collectively discussing it and unpacking it allows for thinking and deepening and getting reflexive, and maybe it'll strengthen you up over the course of the week.
Yeah. I think I mentioned to you, like in the email, being like, oh, I'm not very like political, but we can have these conversations, because that part of the name is breaking down societal norms on the show. But the thing is, when I think the older I'm getting, I'm forever young. I'm learning the importance of educating myself more in politics, even though I think part of me, I don't like to learn about it because it drives me bananas. And so for my mechanism is like, I'll just remove myself and not want to learn about it because, it doesn't affect me. But in reality, it does. And so like with my kiddos, I'm like, how else can I educate myself? And then I want to be able to educate them too.
And to my mind, everything is political. And considering we live in capitalism, to my mind, where we vote is with our money. So if I go to a multinational for my coffee, or I go to a mom and pop shop for my coffee, I'm voting. I've made a decision. And so if we start to think about our money as a space where we can make decisions, It's a really interesting one. Like,
yeah.
For me, food prices have gone through the roof in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually going to the farmer's market and getting fresh eggs is the same price as going to the grocery store for eggs. So once they're at the same price in this region, then if I go buy from the woman who's got the chickens,
Mm-hmm.
that's a political decision.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really beautiful place to sit, because that's where we do have our power, right? Yeah.
With that. Yes. I'm just looking at the time here, and I want to make sure we talk about your 2 different opt-ins. So you have one for individuals. Maybe you want to talk about that one here that's on the screen for anybody looking. It's at or anybody listening, I should say, www.themothercorp.com. When they go into your website, is there just like a pop-in?
The absolute top of my website, there's a header. It says freebies for professionals, freebies for individuals. So for individuals, I have a freebie that's top tips on self-care, holistic self-care. So it's moving away from this kind of like bubble bath solutions for self-care and more into fundamental holistic self-care. And so there's some top tips there. So please feel free to grab that. And then for professionals, it's I think it's a 7-page document, a guide on how to make trauma-informed workplaces. Because as I was saying before, in terms of prevalence, trauma affects us as people. And so we have long relationships with our workplaces. And so indeed, over time, workplaces are impacted by trauma. And so becoming trauma informed, especially for professionals and for workforces, this allows workplaces to be more holistic. But once you take care of people really well, what it ends up doing is it amplifies your workforce, because people are more connected, engaged, they feel cared for, and that means they bring more energy, more focus, and more ability to bring their creative and intellectual capacity to advancing the workplace. So please feel free to grab both of those.
I like that you brought that up, because I know we're a little bit more focused today on individually trauma, but I like thinking more of the workplace, because it's so true. I worked in a very toxic work environment, and so knowing that you do this as well is amazing.
I love being able to meld my mind with my heart. And so when I serve both populations of professionals and individuals, they make use of all of my talent set, which is so beautiful to experience.
Yes, I love that. I have that. If anyone's watching on YouTube here is for the professional and workplace information. So then you can opt in there. And then I'm just going to switch back for the individuals. I can't have 2 on the same time.
Beautiful. Well. So my website's themothercorp.com, and people are welcome to find me there. I'd love it if you joined my mailing list. That way we can stay connected. And please feel free to reach out. I always give complimentary 20 to 30 minute comp calls for people if they want to work one-on-one. And that allows me to have a conversation with them and understand the situation they're dealing with and ensure that it's a good fit. I always try and ensure that I work with people where I can be very effective with them. So if I'm not able to serve you, then I'll give resources and direct people to an appropriate resource. But I want to be able to really love and serve the people that I work with.
I love that. I love that you came on the show today. We'll have you back next year. Can you believe we're already in like 20? My brain can't comprehend that we're almost in 2025. But definitely, I think maybe we can talk a bit about have you back on the workplace trauma and all of that. I think it would be good for others to kind of learn a bit more of that. For everybody listening, thank you so much for tuning into Breaking Norms, Building Dreams. And a big thank you also to the United Public Radio Network, Paranormal Radio Network. Next week, please tune in at 12 Pacific Standard Time, 3 Eastern Time. And we have another special guest. Again, thank you so much, Chavisa, to come on today.
Such a pleasure. It's been such a lovely conversation. Thank you. And thanks for having me on this particularly special day.
Yes.